This is the introduction and overview of the Mining Gold workshop. This program is modular in presentation, but it's holographic in its conceptualization. So I'm going to give you a quick overview of how all this sort of weaves together. I know some men think you can do smorgasbord on this kind of men's work and take what you like and leave with your rest, but our experience is that this is the essence of men's work, and if you do it, you need to do it wholeheartedly. Okay, so the opening idea is that men's work is about finding your authentic self. The way we say this is becoming the man that you want to be. Masculine energy is around action, and therefore men's work is around action. And the way that we look at this is that action requires commitment, and commitment is about relationship. And every time you commit, you either become more trustworthy or less trustworthy, more reliable or less reliable. Every time you commit, you invest in a relationship, and every time you choose not to commit, you lessen your investment in that relationship. And so all of this weaves together into one conceptualization, which is there are always consequences to relationships, whether you like it or not, whether you agree with it or not, that's the way it rolls. And so in this idea of enhancing your relationships or diminishing your relationships, you're also expressing yourself. And so that's your authentic self. And the way that we describe this is authentic action. When you take authentic action, you're doing something that is germane to you being the man you want to be. And therefore, you're building a relationship that's more trustworthy and more stable and more concrete because it's authentic, not fake. All right, so this is again more overview. The reality is if we could do this ourselves, we would have already done it. If we got this in our families growing up, or we got this in the Marine Corps, or wherever else we went to school or learned life lessons, we wouldn't need support. But for us, for me, certainly speaking personally, I realize I cannot do this alone. And so the benefit to me of being on a men's team is that it helps me to learn how to be more authentic. I choose men in my life who are driven by that goal or have that vision for themselves because it helps accelerate my own process. And so a men's team helps me in a number of different ways. Primarily, it helps me to get clear on my commitments. By vetting my commitments, we end up with a situation where the commitment is clear, the timeline is squared away, and most importantly, they determine whether it is a full body yes or whether it's a mumbled yes, maybe I'll do it, or maybe I should do it, or maybe I have to do it, and then I get into a kind of a victim consciousness. So the idea of a full body yes is essential to have on a men's team because they can see when I'm selling myself out, but I necessarily cannot see it. They hold me accountable during the process. That means that they support me at the beginning of making clear commitments, they benchmark with me as I go along, and they celebrate my wins or they help me work through my setbacks. And the setbacks are where the gold is. If I'm, and I'm using terminology we'll define later, if I'm operating below the line and I'm stuck at the border of manifesting my goals, then I need someone to help me, support me, sort it out. If I'm unconsciously sabotaging my success and somehow undercutting my momentum, then I need men to help me transform that into a big win and into me being a great man that I'm meant to be. So mining gold is the process of working through the barriers that prevent us from being the man that we want to be. These are mostly unconscious. These are mostly things that we don't see about ourselves. And most importantly, this is where the maximum growth occurs. But if we don't make commitments, we don't mine gold. And so that's the essence of this, and I'm going to break it down bit by bit as we go forward. Thank you. All right, so a commitment is something that you're going to do in the future, that you make a promise to do in the future. It's a vow. We tend to point positive by saying what we will do. We find that making sort of negative commitments doesn't really work. Like, I won't do that again is almost impossible to be successful at. So the second thing is that commitments are all about relationships, and most people aren't aware of that. Most people don't like that, but that is the truth of the matter. A commitment is a promise that promotes relationship. Say that with me. A commitment is a promise that promotes relationship. And therefore, there are always consequences when you make a commitment or when you don't make a commitment. The consequences are somewhat unconscious a lot of times. People pretend that they don't exist. But you either build and enhance trustworthiness and trust in the relationship, or you undermine trustworthiness and trust in the relationship. If you have a core value of being trustworthy, if you want to be trusted and respected for keeping your word, then you will honor your commitments. And we will talk later about how to set up a structure that helps you be successful with your commitments. Moreover, commitments impact the relationships of everybody who witnesses the commitment. In other words, your teammates, your friends, your family members. And so therefore, you need to recognize that the commitment has a big impact wider than just the person you committed to. It's the circle of people that actually witness it. And of course, commitments help influence our self-esteem, our self-respect, our self-confidence. When we promise ourselves we're going to do something and we don't do it, we feel weakened, we feel disempowered, we feel less than the man that we're capable of being. Thank you. So we're going to talk about the value of trust and being trustworthy. That is one of the core components of a long-lasting, successful relationship. Let me say that differently. Trustworthy is the essential ingredient for a successful long-term relationship. And I'm not just talking about romantic relationships, but think about yourself as a father. You want your children to trust you. You want them to see you as trustworthy. Likewise, business associates and personal friends, the whole thing depends on trust. And so when we make a commitment, it's always about trust. Can I trust you? You can trust me. Those are the balancing points of a relationship, whether it's business or personal or romantic or whatever, and it always works from a place of commitment. If you want to build relationship, then you build trust, and you do that by making clean commitments and being successful at performing them. And if you really are cavalier about the relationship and don't care if it lasts, then you don't need to worry about making commitments. You don't need to value trust. You don't really care about being trustworthy. All right, that's your choice. That's you becoming the man you want to be. My support to you would be to become trustworthy. Thank you. All right, well, when we make a commitment, there are basically three outcomes. We can either keep the commitment, we can break the commitment, or we can renegotiate the commitment. We recommend if you're going to renegotiate that you do it bilaterally, which means talk to the person you made the commitment to and see if you can get a new agreement, rather than unilaterally, which is sending someone notice and say, hey, I can't make the commitment we made, I'm going to renegotiate, here's what I'm willing to do. We want to summarize real quickly for you some of the consequences of a commitment. As I said before, you either increase the connection between you and the person you've committed to and increase the trust, or you reduce the connection and reduce the trust. Your personal reputation is either enhanced or diminished. You're either more reliable or less reliable. It's also a wayfinding tool for you to discover your shadows, your shortcomings, your tendency to overpromise, for example, or to procrastinate, whatever it is. Sometimes when you break a commitment, you get a lot of very valuable information if you're working with a good team. And the last thing I want to say about making or breaking commitments is that there are always consequences, but the way that you handle not keeping the commitment makes a big difference. And so we're going to talk a little bit more about that. Again, renegotiating the commitment is a way that you can minimize the impact of not keeping commitment. The other thing that you can do is establish a consequence for not doing it up front. So if I don't do this by then here's what I will do instead. In other words, you make a consequence that's a benefit to the other person so that they aren't harmed by your broken commitment. And the third thing you can do is make amends, which is essentially make the person whole again, even though you haven't kept your commitment. Those things all indicate that you value the relationship and you're working to rebuild trust and credibility for yourself. Thank you.